The inheritance of $3 million and the clinic director's position will go to Charlie, just so you know." "Excuse me. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Charlie's the eldest son. It's only natural for him to get the inheritance and take over the clinic, right? Finally, it's all ours. Took long enough. Now we won't have to come here all the time and can spend freely." After the funeral of my father, who was a doctor, my brother and his wife Stella, who hadn't shown up for either the wake or the memorial service, suddenly appeared. It was then that Stella, my sister-in-law, started saying these unbelievable words. From her demeanor, it seemed as though she was pleased, maybe even relieved, by my father's passing. I was utterly shocked, but without paying any attention to my reaction, my brother Charlie continued. Pointing at the sign with my father's name on the clinic, he chuckled, "We'll have to change this to my name now. Man, it's been a long wait. Dad, always busy and forever in good health. I've always wondered when he'd finally step down. The day has finally come for me to be the director." What? I couldn't help but let out a gasp. Not a single word of sorrow for our father. Just talks of money and fame. My anger toward the two of them reached its peak. "My name is Rara. I work as an obstetrician-gynecologist at the clinic my father established. He was dedicated to saving countless women as an OB-GYN and assisting with births. My mother, on the other hand, supports pregnant women before and after childbirth as a midwife. The clinic, which Dave cherished, has been providing community-based care for nearly 40 years. Besides my mother, our clinic has a dedicated team of midwives, nurses, dietitians, and medical administrative staff, all of whom are wonderful individuals. The clinic boasts a refreshing atmosphere, and the mood is consistently cheerful. Above all, my father's thorough consultations have a stellar reputation locally. It wasn't uncommon for 2 generations of a family to give birth here. Admiring my father, I chose to become an OB-GYN. I stand in my workplace with the desire to alleviate patients' anxieties and make childbirth a wonderful experience. When I was young, many times my parents couldn't suddenly attend school events or had to cancel weekend outings. Many around us said it was unfortunate, but I never felt that way. My parents, after all, are currently facing life in their profession. Considering this, I've always felt extremely proud of them. However, my brother, Charlie, didn't share that sentiment. Growing disgruntled that our parents didn't prioritize him over their work, he became more rebellious with age. Charlie got his medical license, but instead of taking over our father's clinic, he joined a private university hospital after his training. I, too, worked at a general hospital for a while after my training to gain varied experience. So, I don't think it's wrong for Charlie to work at a university hospital. But there's something I can't forgive about him. He once told our father, "Why would I work in such a tiny clinic?" I had thought, despite his rebelliousness, he might eventually take over the family practice since he was the eldest son. But that wasn't the case. Charlie just wanted the prestige that came with a medical license. He would frequently brag about having a medical license, soaking up praise from those around him, reveling in his superiority. However, Charlie isn't currently working as a doctor. He did join a university hospital, but due to conflicts with his superiors, he resigned shortly after. Even after resigning and not working as a doctor, Charlie must have boasted about having a medical license and, moreover, about our father being a private practitioner. After leaving the university hospital, Charlie switched between jobs and developed a gambling addiction, which led to debt. During this period, he introduced us to his fiancée, Stella. It was clear that she was primarily interested in his perceived wealth. Being a doctor's child, you could live luxuriously without working. Choosing such a demanding job seems silly. That's why you're still single. That's what Stella told me the first time we met. It's true that this job has many unexpected twists and can be physically and mentally taxing. But that doesn't justify being labeled as demanding or ridiculed as silly. Stella, in it for the money, and Charlie, obsessed with prestige. I thought they were a perfect match. Stella works part-time at a cafe, and Charlie remains unemployed even after the marriage. They led a flashy lifestyle, outpacing their supposed modest income, always seemingly in debt. I became aware of their problematic behavior months after I switched jobs from a general hospital to my father's clinic, thinking of his old age. I'm the clinic owner's son. While I was in the middle of my usual consultations, a male voice was yelling at the reception. The patient I was treating and I were both startled. I tried to maintain my composure and continued the consultation, but I could hear frantic footsteps and hushed voices from behind. After a while, the words "help me pay off the debt" again reached my ears. Could it be? A bad feeling crept over me. Suppressing the rising anxiety, I somehow finished the day's consultations. That night, I confronted my parents. Was that Charlie causing a scene at the reception today? Hearing my question, both of them looked visibly uncomfortable. From their expressions, I felt my suspicion had been confirmed without needing an answer. He mentioned debt. Charlie's in debt again. You haven't lent him money, have you? Both my mother and father looked even more distressed. I was hit by the realization of my parents' continued support. Pressing for more information, my father reluctantly opened up. This isn't the first time. He's been coming here multiple times, asking us to help with his debts. I was shocked. After all, my parents paid for Charlie's private college tuition for 8 years, including the years he repeated, and yet he was wasting his medical license and drowning in gambling. It was infuriating to know a grown man, past 40, with a family, was still accumulating debt. And to think my parents had been bailing him out, without even chastising him, irked me even more. You should refuse. It's a debt from his leisure, right? Why do you guys have to pay it off? It's not that simple. I did refuse at first, but Charlie kept making a scene at the reception until I agreed. You're kidding. Think about the disturbance for our staff and the inconvenience to our operations. More than that, thinking about the discomfort of our patients, we just can't say no. So, that's why he came to the clinic, knowing it would corner them. I was infuriated by Charlie's cunning strategy. However, it seemed my parents felt more than just anger towards Charlie. We sometimes think that Charlie turned out this way because we always prioritized our work. Seeing my mother struggle to speak, a deep feeling of helplessness wells up inside me. Well, there's nothing you could have done about it. If Dad and you didn't prioritize the patients, what would happen to the expecting mothers and the newborns? Charlie used to work as a doctor for a while, so he should understand that much. But still, when I look at Charlie now, I can't help but think there might have been another way. I'm not married, and I don't have kids, so I can't fully grasp the depth of a parent's emotions. That's why it's hard for me to accept my parents, who seem to feel so guilty about Charlie. We're not kids anymore, we're grown adults. Regardless of the past, we should be able to come to terms with things and stand on our own 2 feet. That's what I believe, and that's how I want to be. However hard it was for me to accept their view, I guess to my parents, both Charlie and I will always be their children. I think they lend money to him for the clinic's sake, but perhaps they felt the need to make amends for past mistakes. But this couldn't go on. I tried my best to get Charlie to stop relying on our parents. I've even forcefully escorted Charlie and his wife out of the clinic and told them to stop. But Charlie dismissed me saying, "It's none of your business." What's wrong with leveraging the privilege of a doctor's child? If there's money available, why not let us spend it? With a smug look on her face, Stella laughed at me, saying that, ultimately, I felt helpless against my brothers and his wife's irresponsibility. Despite the challenges at work, I'd often ponder what I could do to help my parents. But as days turned into months, no solution appeared, and I continued to feel frustrated and distressed. Then, the day came. My father suddenly passed away from a heart attack. There was still so much I needed to learn from him. So much more I wanted him to teach me. Overwhelmed with grief and regret, my mother and I managed to prepare for his funeral. Many people, owing to my father's popularity, attended his funeral service. However, despite being notified, Charlie and Stella didn't show up for either the wake or the funeral. After the funeral was over, the weight of the past few days and the reality that my father was no longer with us felt like a gaping hole in my heart. I wondered if my mother felt the same. But instead of heading home, our feet took us to the clinic. Upon reaching the clinic, we sank into the waiting room's couch, lost in our farts without exchanging words. However, within 10 minutes, the doorbell rang. Lifting myself up, I opened the door to find Charlie and Stella standing there. "What do you want? The funeral's over, you know." I couldn't hide my disdain for them, especially since they had missed the funeral. But the two of them seemed unfazed and smirked smugly. Stella, with her unnerving grin, said something I hadn't expected. Charlie will inherit the $3 million inheritance and the clinic's directorship, okay? Excuse me. What are you talking about? It's only natural, right? Charlie's the eldest son. He's supposed to inherit the wealth and take over the clinic. Finally, everything's ours. No more having to come here. We can finally spend freely. Stella laughed haughtily, hinting they'd been looking forward to my father's passing. Taken aback by her insensitivity, I was left speechless. However, without bothering with me, Charlie jumped in. Pointing at the clinic's sign bearing our father's name, he laughed, saying, "We'll have to change this to my name." Man, this took forever. Despite having no breaks, Dad was so healthy. Kept wondering when he'd finally kick the bucket. And at last, the day has come when I become the director. What? I couldn't help but let out a gasp. All they talked about was money and fame, no word of mourning for my father. My anger reached its peak. No way I'm handing Dad's clinic over to them. Just as I was about to raise my voice to throw them out, la ha ha. My mother, standing beside me, burst into uncontrollable laughter, clapping her hands. Mom. Her reaction caught me off guard. Charlie and Stella, too, looked taken aback. But they quickly reverted to their smug expressions. Has Mom gone nuts since Dad passed away? Charlie said, mocking our mother. I snapped back to my senses and quickly stepped in to defend her. How dare you say something like that? Despite my scolding, Charlie showed no signs of remorse. However, our mother didn't seem to be angered by Charlie's attitude either. Perhaps trying to compose herself after her fit of laughter, she let out a sigh. Instead of being flustered, she even seemed somewhat composed, which visibly irritated Charlie. Stop laughing and get on with the paperwork. Demanding so, Charlie started to rush our mother. Without paying any heed to Charlie's impudence, she just responded, "All right," and handed him a piece of paper. What? Immediately, Charlie's voice of astonishment filled the room. Yes, the document my mother presented was my father's will. I had no knowledge of this will's existence. Listening to Charlie read it aloud, it explicitly stated that I would take over the clinic and the inheritance would be split between my mother and me. Moreover, Charlie was excluded from the inheritance. It appeared that he was removed due to the continuous debts from his gambling habits that my father had to cover. My father had already completed the necessary procedures to exclude Charlie while he was still alive. Charlie's hands trembled as he held the will. Stella, standing next to him, looked equally shocked. With a gracious smile, my mother spoke up after confirming their reactions. That's how it is. We'll handle the inheritance and clinic takeover procedures from here. There's nothing for you two to do, so you might as well leave now. You're joking. Charlie's the eldest son. It's customary for the eldest son to take over the family business. That's right. This will is invalid. The clinic is mine, and I will get the inheritance. I'll live off Dad's money my entire life. Stella argued back first, followed by a furious outburst from Charlie. But my mother remained unfazed. To begin with, Charlie, who hasn't practiced medicine in years, can't possibly run the clinic, even with a medical license. What? I have a medical license, so I should be able to run the clinic. Having a license but not practicing for years makes you unqualified, not just as a doctor but as a director as well. That's ridiculous. Stella's voice rose in anger at my mother's words. Seeing the two of them argue, Charlie turned pale. Panicking, he spoke up. So, you're saying I can't be the clinic director? Who would hand over Dad's cherished clinic to someone like you? I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer, raising my voice. Even if the will hadn't appointed me as the clinic director, I would never have considered passing it to Charlie. My outburst made Charlie change his attitude drastically. The cockiness was gone, replaced by pleading eyes. We've always lived off Dad's money. Now that he's gone, we can't survive without his inheritance. Please, share some of it with us. Dad decided to exclude you from the inheritance because he didn't want to deal with your problems even after his death. My voice resonated with the anger and resentment I had held back. Seeing the firm stand of my mother and me, Charlie looked utterly defeated. Stella, in her anxious state, began berating him. What will we do now? If you can't be the director and there's no inheritance, then there's no point in being married to you. What can I do? If I knew this was going to happen, I would never have married you. Liar. Sort this out. Watching the couple bicker, both my mother and I were beyond irritated. If you're going to fight, do it elsewhere. If you don't leave now, I'll call the police. With that, I motioned for them to leave. The mention of police seemed to work as the bickering couple hurriedly left the clinic. Months have passed since then, and it seems Charlie and Stella are still together, both burdened by their deaths. Despite knowing about Charlie's exclusion from the inheritance and his inability to become a clinic director, Stella apparently couldn't bring herself to leave him. They reportedly work tirelessly all day and argue continuously. On the other hand, I reopened the clinic shortly after my father's funeral. While I hadn't fully come to terms with his death, I couldn't take an extended break given the patients waiting. In the end, it was for the best. Taking on the role of the clinic director and leading a busy life left me little time to dwell on my sorrow. The words of gratitude from my patients have also been a great source of comfort. Today, I take pride in my fulfilling job and find joy in witnessing the start of new lives. I'm determined to not only protect this precious clinic that my father cherished, but to also strive every day to become a doctor he would be proud of.